This is Travel in 10, a series of 10-minute travel shows from around the world that you can download to your iPod and take with you as you travel.
And now, your host, David Brody.
Welcome to this month's edition of the Travel in 10 podcast. On this show, we're going to be featuring part 2 of my interview with Seth Stevenston. Seth is the author of Grounded, Down-to-Earth Journeys Around the World. It's a great book where he sets off on a around-the-world journey without ever setting foot on a plane, ever looking at an airport. He's decided to tour the world by freighter boat, by train, by bicycle, any means you can imagine other than by flying. It's the type of journey that I think a lot of people dream about, and that Seth actually had the guts to go try and wrote a great book about his journey. In the second part of the interview, he talks about some of the highlights of that trip and some of his next travel plans. I'd encourage you, if you haven't listened to part 1 of the interview, that's on our previous podcast. You might want to check that one out first, and then come back and listen to part 2. So sit back, enjoy, and I hope you enjoy part 2 of my interview with Seth Stevenston, the author of Grounded. Being a travel writer, were you filing stories as you went, or did you sort of save everything up for the book at the end?
No, this was all saved up. I do a lot of travel stories from various places, but I knew that this trip was just going to be for this book, and so I took copious notes everywhere along the way, be it in a train car in Russia or, in the cabin of a container ship. I was just taking notes on everything, and then when I got back to Washington, D.C. and the trip was all over, I took all those notes and boiled them down and figured out how to turn them into a book.
And do you think, could you do a trip like this again later in life? I mean, do you think you could do something like this with children, or do you think it's really something that you could almost only do at this stage in your life?
I think you could certainly do segments of it later in life and with children. I think it would be a tall order to try to take a young child all the way around the world the way that I did it. There were some moments that were not the most comfortable or even the safest all the time. You could certainly take a kid on a container ship and, depending on the length of the passage, they might get a little bored, but they might love hanging out on that bridge and talking to the officers and getting to learn how you steer a ship, touring the engine room, that kind of thing. Certainly a cycling trip is something you could do later in life, whereas I did it in Vietnam, maybe if you were a little bit older, you might do it through France, But certainly you could take parts of this trip and recreate them at any time in life, and parts that you could do with a family. I do think trying to do the whole way round is something that might be best reserved for people who've got some patience, who are a little bit fit, and whose responsibilities only extend to themselves.
Looking back at the 6 months traveling around the world, is there one moment that sort of really stands out in your mind that sort of really defines the trip for you? It's hard. I guess, I would say the key moment of the whole trip was when the quest almost fell apart entirely, and that was in Singapore. I had passage booked from Singapore to Australia on a cargo ship, and at the last moment the ship had electrical problems, and they had to cancel that passage. And it turns out there aren't a lot of easy ways to get over water from Singapore to Australia. I suspect it has a little bit to do with Australia trying to keep out some people from that part of the world, from Indonesia and from the Philippines, and so there just isn't a lot of public ferry traffic that goes to the north coast of Australia. And so I was having a heck of a time finding any way to get there, and it looked like this was all going to fall apart. I had to meet up with another freighter out of Sydney, and time was running out, and I wasn't going to be able to cancel it. I was going to be out a ton of money, and there was just no good way, and I thought I was going to have to fly, which was going to be miserable. And then we spotted this cruise ship in Singapore Harbor. This is after we walked around the luxury yacht docks, hoping to find someone to pay us to take us on a cabin cruiser to Australia. This is after we called every port agent in Singapore trying to find a freighter headed our way. Spotted a cruise ship in the harbor and wrote down the URL that was on its smokestack. Looked it up, called the home office for it in Britain, and somehow talked my way onto it at the very last second. Ended up literally sprinting down the gangplank as the horn was blowing on the ship, as it was pulling away from the dock. Jumped on board with the bursar. They pulled up the gangplank as my feet left it as I got onto the ship and pulled and steamed out into the Singapore harbor. That was the moment where it was sort of the most exhilarating moment, because we went from thinking that this entire quest had been ruined to the sort of one of the more exciting things I've ever done in my life, sprinting to catch a ship as it leaves the dock. It sounds like it would make a good movie. I mean, when you guys were doing this, did you, being somebody who obviously write for Slate, you understand new media well, did you capture video of this as you went around the world? Did you think of using that as you traveled as well?
Definitely took a lot of photos, took photos everywhere I went, and there you can look at those. There's a Facebook page for the book where you can look at a lot of those photos from different places. Taking video, something, in retrospect, I really wish I'd done, and I think it would have been helpful. And a lot of times when I was talking to people about doing TV interviews, they would say, do you have any video footage we can use? And I wished I did, but it would have been, it's a bit of a tall order, as a new media journalist, you're asked to do a lot these days. But for me to take notes, to take photos, to take video, to be thinking about all the AV aspects of this, while also trying to travel and have experiences that are going to create a compelling narrative, that's a lot to juggle. And I think you can sort of spread yourself too thin if you try to do too much. It was sort of enough for me to try to travel, have experiences, take notes on those experiences so I could turn them into a narrative later, and take some photos along the way. Even just doing those things sometimes would be a little bit taxing.
Now, would you travel like this again, or would you get on a plane next time?
Oh, I avoid planes like the plague. I avoid planes whenever possible. I do a lot of traveling up and down the Northeast Quarter here in the U.S. between Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. Always take the Acela, never take an airplane. I really enjoy taking the train. For my book tour, I went from Boston to New York to Chicago to Los Angeles, and I did it all on Amtrak, which reminded me how much I enjoy taking Amtrak. That leg between Chicago and Los Angeles is a wonderful trip. It's 2 nights. You go through Colorado ranchland. You go through New Mexico desert. We had a herd of elk startled by our train, that on the tracks that started scampering past our windows as we went by. It's an amazing trip, and that's not an incredibly expensive thing to do. As I say, it's only 2 nights between Chicago and Los Angeles. That's a great little family vacation to take if you're looking for something to do.
And now, having done this amazing sort of 6-month round-the-world trip, where do you want to go next?
Where do I want to go next? I would like to incorporate more sailboats into my travel. That is my next surface transport. That's what I'm lusting after when it comes to surface transport. I've been learning how to sail and how to captain a mid-sized boat, and I sailed a catamaran. I sailed a 36-foot catamaran around the British Virgin Islands last summer, and I'd like to do more sailing and work my way up to maybe cross an ocean in a sailboat. I think that would be a lot of fun. So that's sort of my surface travel dream at the moment.
And is that the next book?
Maybe so. We'll see. Going to take a little break from writing a book is a little bit exhausting. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it takes it out of you. I think I'm gonna bide my time a little bit and work up to the next one.
Absolutely. Well, really good to talk to you, Seth. Thanks for taking the time to do this today. If people want to check out the website, where can they find it?
Well, you can look for facebook.com/grounded Seth Stevenson, or you can go to my website, sethstevenson.com, and that'll take you there too.
And of course, they can check out the book for all the rest of the stories as well.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. Download more of our travel shows from around the world at www.travelin10.com.
This has been a presentation of Travel in 10.